Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a hard look at a narrative that has, well, it's basically become the wallpaper of the tech industry.
Oh, yeah.
It is the comparison you hear everywhere, right? Artificial intelligence is the modern-day Gutenberg printing press.
It's the ultimate historical anchor, isn't it? It gives this massive, scary technological shift, a kind of comforting, familiar shape.
Fully.
The story goes, just as the printing press democratized books, broke the monopoly of the scribes back in the 1400s, AI is now democratizing intelligence.
Exactly. And on the surface, that feels incredibly optimistic. It feels like we're on the edge of a new renaissance or something. But today, we're gonna complicate that feeling a little bit. We've pulled together a stack of research that suggests that while the printing press changed how we distribute thought, AI might be fundamentally changing how we generate it.
And not necessarily in the way we might want. We have an industry analysis from Fujitsu and the Case HQ that, builds that economic argument, the pro-efficiency side. But we're going to clash that against some heavy educational psychology from Scott H. Young on something called Desirable Difficulties, a report from the Chartered College of Teaching, and this is the big one, a groundbreaking new study titled Your Brain on ChatGPT.
Your brain on ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Sounds like one of those public service announcements from the 90s.
Honestly, the findings are startling enough to warrant one. This study actually hooked people up to EEG machines to see what happens, electrically inside the skull when we write with AI versus when we write alone.
Wow.
And it frames a concept that I think every single person listening needs to understand: cognitive debt.
That phrase cognitive debt, that really stuck with me. We talk about technical debt and coding or, financial debt. But the idea that you can borrow against your own future intelligence, that's kind of terrifying.
It is. So the core question we're trying to answer today is, in our rush for efficiency, are we accidentally outsourcing the neural workout that's required to actually learn anything?
Yeah.
Are we skipping leg day for the brain, like, forever?
Okay, so let's start with the pro argument first. We need to be fair to the optimists here. We've got this analysis from Fujitsu, and they're looking at this purely through the lens of industrial evolution.
Right. And if you look at the history of labor, their point is pretty solid. The printing press was a total disaster for the scribes who hand-copied Bibles.
They were out of a job.
Completely. But it was a miracle for humanity. Fujitsu argues we're seeing that same shift now. They describe it as a move from physical to intellectual labor, and they warn about the Kodak moment.
Which is the classic business school cautionary tale, right? Kodak invents a digital camera, buries it to protect their film business, and then goes extinct.
Precisely. Fujitsu is basically saying, don't be Kodak. Don't cling to the old way of processing information just because it's comfortable. They even cite examples like the consortium's LyffeLab. They used AI to design and synthesize a completely new cancer drug candidate. Do you have any idea how long that took them?
I mean, usually that's years of R&D. Millions and millions of dollars.
30 days.
30 days. Okay, so in that context, arguing against AI feels like arguing against electricity. If we can cure cancer in a month, who cares if we lose the scribes?
And that is the efficiency argument. For production, for just getting a result, it is undeniable. The Case HQ backs this up, but they add a nuance that often gets glossed over in all the hype.
What's that?
The printing press allowed us to distribute existing knowledge. It took a manuscript that some human had already agonized over and just made 1,000 copies.
Right, it was a distribution tool,
Yeah.
a photocopier on steroids.
But generative AI is different. It creates new knowledge or, at least new text on demand. The Fujitsu piece calls it science as a service. You have a hypothesis, the AI tests it, simulates it, gives you the result.
Which is great for pharma. I definitely want my drugs developed fast. But
Right.
here's the pivot. When we move from science as a service to thinking as a service for an individual, say a student writing an essay or a manager writing a strategy doc, something shifts, doesn't it?
That is the absolute crux of the problem. Efficiency is very often the enemy of learning.
That sounds so counterintuitive. We always want to learn faster. Every app promises to help you learn faster.
We want to acquire information faster. That's different from learning. Learning implies a real change in long-term memory and understanding. And that brings us to Scott H. Young's work and this concept of desirable difficulties. It was a term coined by the psychologist Robert Bjork.
I found Jung's analogy of hill climbing really helpful here to visualize this. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. So imagine you're standing in a landscape that's covered in this thick fog. You want to get to the highest peak, the mountain of mastery.
Okay.
But you can't see the mountain. You can only see the ground right in front of your feet. So what do? Naturally.
Take the step that goes up, you look for the steepest immediate path, and you start climbing.
Exactly. You look for the path of least resistance that still feels like you're making progress. In learning, looking up an answer feels like progress. Using ChatGPT to draft an email feels like progress. You solve the immediate problem. You climb the little hill.
But because of the fog, you don't realize you're just on what he calls a local maximum, a tiny little hill. And by taking all the easy steps, you might have actually walked away from the big mountain.
That is the trap. Bjork's whole argument is that short-term performance often correlates negatively with long-term retention. The harder it is to retrieve a memory, the more you have to struggle and squint and strain to remember a fact, the stronger that neural pathway becomes. That struggle is the signal to your brain that says, hey, keep this.
It's the difference between looking at a map and actually driving the route. I could be a passenger with GPS on 10 times, and I still won't know how to get there. I'm just watching. But if I have to drive it myself, I get lost and have to turn off the radio and actually figure it out. I never forget it.
That moment of getting lost is the desirable difficulty. Your brain wakes up, it says, oh, this matters, we're in danger of failing here, I need to encode this. When you use an AI to bypass that struggle, your brain basically says, the machine's got this, I can purge this info, it's not essential.
So if we apply this to the expertise reversal effect from that other source, the Chartered College of Teaching, this suggests that help isn't always helpful.
It depends entirely on where you are in your journey. If you're a total novice, you need hand-holding, you need the training wheels, you need that structure. But as you start to get a handle on a topic, you need to engage in what they call schema construction.
Schema construction.
It means you're building your own mental maps of how concepts connect. You need to verify those links yourself.
And if the tool just keeps doing the connecting for you.
You experience the reversal effect. The guidance actually starts to hurt you. It prevents you from doing the heavy lifting that's required to become an expert. It keeps you in that novice state forever. You never graduate from the training wheels.
So the AI acts like a helicopter parent for your brain. It never lets you fall, so you never really learn to walk.
That is a perfect way to put it. And until recently, that was all just psychological theory. We sort of knew it intuitively, but now, thanks to the Cosmina team at MIT, we actually have physiological proof.
This study, Your Brain on ChatGPT, is the centerpiece. Let's break down exactly what they did, because the methodology is really, really rigorous. This wasn't just a survey asking people how they felt.
No. They took participants and split them into 3 distinct groups. Their task was to write essays on standard SA2 prompts, things like loyalty, success, that kind of thing.
Okay, lay out the groups for us so we can track this.
So group 1 is the LLM group. They use ChatGPT to help write the essay any way they want.
Okay.
Group 2 is the search engine group. They can use Google, but no AI generation. Group 3 is the brain-only group. No tech, just a blank page and their own minds.
And they measured them in 2 ways. How they performed behaviorally, so what came out on the page, and what their brains were doing electrically via those EEG caps.
Right. And let's start with the behavioral stuff, specifically the exit interview. Immediately after the participants finished writing, the researchers covered up the screen and asked a really simple question. Can you quote one sentence from the essay you just produced?
This is the part that just blew my mind. Because they just wrote it. It was seconds ago.
It is staggering. In the brain-only and the search groups, retention was high. Only about 11% failed to recall a quote. They wrestled with the words, so they owned them.
Makes sense. And the ChatGPT group?
83% failed.
Wait, 83?
83% could not recall a single sentence from the essay they had just written moments before.
That's functionally zero retention. It's like the words passed through their eyes and out their fingers without ever touching their brains.
It suggests they didn't really write anything in the cognitive sense. They just monitored a process. And the participants, they felt it too. When they were asked about ownership, the brain-only group used words like pride, personal, my voice. The LLM group reported feeling guilty, lazy, and alienated. One person explicitly said it felt like cheating.
That emotional disconnect is so telling. But the alienation wasn't just a feeling, was it? It was visible on the brain scans. This is where we get to the EEG data. So what does a brain look like when it's actually writing?
Well, for the brain-only group, it looks like a fireworks display in specific frequencies. We saw high connectivity in the theta and alpha bands.
Okay, for those of us who aren't neuroscientists, translate that. What is the brain doing when it's in theta?
Think of theta and alpha as the frequencies of internal attention. Alpha often kicks in to inhibit sensory input. It literally shuts out the world so you can focus on a thought. And theta is heavily linked to memory retrieval, organizing information. When you see that activity, it means the brain is talking to itself. It's pulling up memories, synthesizing concepts, structuring an argument. It is deep work.
Okay, so that's the baseline for actual thinking.
Right.
What about the Google group?
They look different. They showed high beta band activity. Beta is made of faster frequencies. It's associated with active external engagement, visual processing, motor planning.
That makes perfect sense. They're scanning headlines, clicking links, filtering search results.
Exactly. Their brains were busy, but in a curatorial way. They were hunting and gathering information from the outside world.
Okay. And the ChatGPT group, what did their brain maps look like?
Quiet. Significantly lower connectivity across the board. The maps were just much sparser. They weren't doing the deep internal synthesis of the theta group, and they weren't doing the active hunting of the beta group. They were passive.
That is haunting.
Uh-huh.
It's like their brains went into screensaver mode while the essay just appeared on the screen.
That silence in the brain scan is precisely what the researchers define as cognitive debt. You're getting the product, the finished essay, without paying the neural cost. You are borrowing against the bank of your own ability to think.
But the problem with debt is that eventually the bill comes due. Did the study look at what happens when you take the tool away? Or can we just live on cognitive credit forever?
Oh, they looked. This was session 4 of the study. They took the people who had been using ChatGPT for the previous sessions and said, okay, training wheels off, write an essay with just your brain.
The crash.
It was a hard crash. The former LLM users struggled immensely. Their writing became superficial, their arguments fell apart. But the most interesting part, I think, was the n-gram analysis. The researchers look at the statistical patterns of the words they use.
And what did that show?
Even when the bot was gone, the humans were still trying to sound like the bot. They had lower lexical diversity, which means a smaller vocabulary. They were reusing these generic, polished phrases that they'd seen the AI use in previous sessions.
Wait, so the tool actually rewrote their internal software. They weren't just dependent on it, they were starting to mimic it.
The tool shaped the thinking. And this brings us to a really critical point about bias. We usually talk about AI bias in terms of, the training data being unfair, but this study showed a more subtle structural bias in how these tools direct our attention.
This was the philanthropy prompt, right? I think this is fascinating.
They asked all the groups to write about philanthropy. The search engine group, the Google users, wrote overwhelmingly about homelessness.
Why homelessness specifically?
Because of the algorithm. If you Google philanthropy or charity, Google's whole ad ecosystem and SEO trends prioritize high-traffic, high-value keywords. Homelessness is a massive topic in news and ad spend, so the search users saw homelessness at the top of the page, and that became their thought.
So the tool didn't just give them facts, it decided the subject of their thinking. It steered the ship for them.
Correct. Meanwhile, the LLM group focused on these abstract concepts of giving and altruism, which just reflects the weights in the GPT training data. It gave the most average possible answer.
This is the part that scares me more than the lazy brain aspect. We think we're using these tools to express our ideas. I want to write about charity. But what this study suggests is that we are outsourcing the ideation itself. We aren't just letting the bot type, we're letting it decide what is worth writing about.
That's the ultimate danger of cognitive debt. It's not just that you forget facts, it's that your ability to generate original divergent connections just atrophies. The brain-only group, with those theta waves, they were making unique connections based on their personal lives. The tech groups were basically just conduits for the average of human knowledge served up by an algorithm.
And it connects right back to that expertise reversal effect. If you never build the schema yourself, if you never struggle through the fog to find the mountain, you don't have a map. You just have a series of turn-by-turn directions that you're following blindly.
And the participants felt that loss of agency. The brain-only group, despite the struggle, or maybe because of it, felt powerful. They said things like, I discovered what I thought. The LLM group felt like spectators in their own work.
So we have to ask the practical question here. We're not going to smash the printing presses. We're not going to ban ChatGPT. That Fujitsu article is right. The business world demands efficiency. If my boss wants a report in an hour, I can't say, sorry, I need to go build some theta waves first.
No, you definitely can. And we shouldn't necessarily stop using them. They're miraculous tools. But we need to be incredibly intentional about when we use them. We need to distinguish between performance and learning.
Break that down for us. What's the rule of thumb?
Performance is about the output. If you need to draft a generic email to schedule a meeting or summarize a meeting from a transcript or code a basic website component you've done 1,000 times, that is a performance task.
Right.
You don't need to build new neural pathways for that. Efficiency is king. Let the bot do it.
Right. I don't need desirable difficulty when I'm asking for a refund on a flight or writing a memo about parking spaces.
Exactly. But if you are trying to understand a new strategic direction for your company, or learn a new programming language, or figure out your moral stance on a complex political issue, do not outsource the draft.
Because that struggle, that just staring at the blank page, that is the learning.
That is the only place the learning happens. The zone of optimal learning requires friction. You remove the friction, you remove the growth.
It's interesting. The study noted that even in that last session, the brain-only connectivity didn't fully reset for the LLM users. They were sort of stuck in this intermediate state. They weren't fully engaged, but they weren't fully passive either. They were just driftless.
And that is the warning. We risk entering a state of permanent cognitive drift. We become excellent editors, excellent curators, but we might lose the ability to be creators.
So the takeaway is, embrace the friction. Don't let the desirable difficulties become outsourced easiness.
Use the tool to distribute your thoughts, not to have them for you.
I want to leave you with a final thought from that study, something to really chew on. We started with the printing press. We mentioned how the scribes disappeared because, well, they just weren't needed anymore.
Right.
But the study raises a much darker possibility. If we habitually use AI to skip the struggle of articulation, that messy, hard process of finding the right words, are we risking a future where we can no longer think deeply or critically unless there's a cursor blinking on a screen waiting to do it for us?
It raises the fundamental question. If you can't write it yourself, do you actually know it? Or are you just a host for the machine's intelligence?
A question we're struggling with. Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure.